Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am going to be doing a book review for you. So the book that I'm going to be reviewing today is Zeros by Scott Westerfeld, Margot Lanigan, and Deborah Biancotti. This is an ARC that I received from Simon & Schuster, so thanks very much to them for sending me this book to review. So first off, I'm just going to start by giving you kind of a summary of the book in general. This book follows our 6 main characters: Scam, Flicker, Crash, Bellwether, Anonymous, and Mob. These 6 characters are all about the same age and live in California, and the thing that unites them all is that they have some sort of superpower. 5 of these main characters are all in a group that calls themselves the Zeros. The Zeros operate, or used to operate, in a sort of group effort where they were training to be able to go on missions to save people before Scam did something that somehow broke this team up. The superpowers in this book are really interesting. So there's Scam, who has some kind of voice inside him, and whenever he opens his mouth in a really terrible situation, the voice will just start speaking for him and will get him out of it, but not necessarily in a way that's good. Flicker is blind, but she has the ability to see the world through other people's eyes, moving through crowds as quickly as possible, even though she is in one place. Crash, my favorite of all of the characters, has the ability to crash technology. Bellwether and Mob are really interesting because they both manipulate crowds, but in very different ways. And of course, Anonymous is just... you never can quite keep him in your mind. He's always unnoticeable, and as soon as he's gone, you kind of forget him. This book starts with Scam getting into a really sticky situation, and even though he hasn't spoken to the rest of his friends in a very long time, calling them for help. And at that point, Mob is not part of their group. She's just sort of on the outside, but she kind of starts to get dragged into the situation as well. So, now on to sort of a review. I like each character in this book an incredible amount. I thought that they were all really interesting, although I am very suspicious of Bellwether and his motivations. I'm just curious. But my favorite character, as I said, is easily Crash, whose real name is Chizara. Crash is so interesting as a character, and every time one of her chapters came up, I was immediately much more excited and enthused to read about whatever was going on with her, because I think that she is the most layered and detailed of the Zeros. This book is also a very fast read, despite its size. This is a very thick book, and I read it in only 2 days, because it is so fast-paced. However, that fast pacing doesn't feel inauthentic. It doesn't feel like it's one thing after another. It feels very logical that this much is going on and how much is building up, and that makes it even more enjoyable to read in such a short amount of time, because you just have to get through it. One of the things that really stands out about this book is the relationship between all of the characters, because they all have such interesting relationships, and you have to slowly learn about each character based on how everyone else thinks of them. The one thing I will say that I didn't totally love about the character relationships is that they sort of coupled off in what felt like a very insta-love-y kind of way. Just sort of out of nowhere, they were really dedicated to each other, and it felt very strange and very sudden, which I didn't love, but I think will be explored in further books, so it didn't bother me that much. This book is a superhero book, and it felt very much like an origin story kind of thing. It felt like a coming together against all odds and finding a reason to fight. Like, it had all of those themes, but it didn't feel cliche necessarily, because at this point, I think we're all starting to get a little superheroed out. With DC and Marvel releasing all of these movies, and it's been a lot all at once. So I was worried about starting a book that is about kids who are superheroes, but it didn't feel cliche. It felt very authentic, and all of the characters slowly coming together. I understood why they had to find a reason to come together and to fight, because the reasons they didn't get along and the reasons they weren't already fighting made total sense. And also the reasons for them coming together made sense. So I really appreciated that it was an origin story at heart, but not necessarily one that I feel like I've seen a million times. Another thing I will say about Zeros is that it felt very similar to another book by Scott Westerfeld, interestingly enough. I think that this book had a lot of similarities to the Midnighter series by Scott Westerfeld. However, while I did like the Midnighters, I feel like the elements that Zeros took from Midnighters were improved upon. It didn't feel like a copy or a repeat of a series that had already been done. It felt like building off from some of those original ideas and the superheroed kids who suddenly have to deal with something beyond them. It felt like that, but I felt like it did it better than was done in Midnighters. The kids in this book were just, I think, a lot more well-developed and interesting overall, which was really cool for me as someone who came from Midnighters, really liking it but wanting slightly more. That's exactly what I got. Finally, what this book left me with was just sort of a lot of questions, which is okay because it is the first in a series. And I very much want to read more books about it because while I feel like we got a base level about a lot of characters, there were some characters that weren't explored enough and that I want to learn more about, and I want to understand more about the relationship and their backgrounds. Because one of the things that I loved about the characters is that diversity was a thing that happened. Thank you for recognizing that if a bunch of kids were going to get superpowers, it wouldn't be 6 middle-class white kids with semi-unhappy families. Each character in this book had a totally original background, and they were all very different. They came from different ethnic backgrounds, from different economic backgrounds. They had different family lives, which was such a relief in terms of young adult that sometimes feels very focused on a specific type of person. I was so grateful to that, and I would love to see some of that diversity explored more in the next book, because it was definitely addressed in this, but I would love to see more. This was definitely the first book in what I think is going to be a really good series. It was an origin story, and I liked it, but I want more. I want to know now what happens with this origin story and where this story can kind of go from here, because it was a very awesome start, and I'm very into it, but I want to know more, which is, I think, the sign of a very good book. The fact that I want more books is a very good sign for book 1. So this was a fantastic book. I really, really loved it. I tore through it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I eagerly await more. So this book comes out this year, September 29th. Look for it in stores. Go and get a copy, but be prepared to sit down and read it very quickly because, wow, it is fast-paced and so interesting. Well, that's my review of Zeros. Thank you again to Simon & Schuster for sending me a copy. It was so exciting to read, and I had a lot of fun exploring this story and this world. I hope that I've convinced you to read it because I really did love it, honestly. I was worried I wouldn't, but I absolutely loved it, and I'm really glad that I read it. So I hope I've convinced you. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!